Doctor Who's second 60th anniversary special, Wild Blue Yonder, aired last weekend, and it was very weird, and I love it. Okay, so a lot of people were very excited for this special and had a lot of high expectations for this episode, expecting a lot of surprise cameos and a lot more, mainly down to its secrecy in terms of the marketing, which may have been not the best decision from the team, which Russell has acknowledged himself.
I think that might have had an unfortunate effect. I think everyone's expecting Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi and the ghost of William Hartnell riding on the back of the Garm.
But personally, for me, for this episode, I just wanted something kind of weird and mind-bending and scary, with some good character work and emotion in there. Something a little bit like Series 4's Midnight, and luckily, that's exactly what we got for this episode. So this episode starts with a cold open with Isaac Newton under the apple tree, and I seem to be the only one who liked this cold open from what I've seen at least. I know a lot of people have complained about how pointless and unnecessary it feels, which is true, but for me personally, I honestly don't really see why that matters. It doesn't necessarily have to have much of a point to it, and it's just a bit of a fun scene that's setting up a running joke with the episode, and a nice way to kind of make you feel kind of comfortable before the episode gets really scary and weird, which I think just really adds to the impact of the scary and weird stuff in this episode.
You can appreciate
the gravity of the situation.
So I love the opening of this episode proper, with the Doctor and Donna exploring the ship, and also the fact that the TARDIS leaves with the Sonic I thought was a really good touch, because it means they not only don't have the TARDIS to escape, but the Doctor also doesn't have his Sonic, which we now know is significantly upgraded from the past. I think the ship looks really great for the most part, especially the small practical rooms, the actual sets that were used in this episode, and the huge expansive CGI corridor was really cool. I've seen a few people say that this part of the ship looks pretty bad, and while I don't completely disagree, I think for the most part it looks pretty good, but there are some parts where the CGI and like the green screen of that corridor setting, such as when they're running and stuff like that, does look a little bit bad, and the keying of the green screen is a little bit too obvious, which is a shame, but like I said, for the most part I actually thought it looked pretty good. And yeah, this whole opening bit with the Doctor and Donna is very reminiscent of something like the Ark in Space from classic Doctor Who, which is one I've actually seen, where they're just trying to figure out where everyone is and what's going on, and there's a few mysteries introduced for the episode as well, with the different words being said over the tannoy and the clanging they hear every now and then, as well as them finding out that the airlock opened and closed 3 years ago, and also the fact that Jimbo, the cute little robot, is walking one step at a time every now and then when we hear the words. So then we're introduced to the main villains of the story, which people are dubbing the Not Things, and I think the introduction of these villains was really well done. For a second, I thought we were just kind of having a little jump cut that was kind of skipping us ahead in time whilst they were finishing off this task that they were doing in separate rooms, until we then cut back and see that there's actually two versions of the Doctor and Donna in each of the rooms, and none of our characters know about it, and I think it was just really, really well done for that introduction, especially when we didn't know what the villain or the threat of this episode was going to be, which is one of the benefits of it being so secretive. And you can say what you want about what the creatures look like and some of the effects of the creatures, which I'll get to later on, but the initial line before all that happens of "my arms are too long,"
My arm's too long.
was just so creepy, and such a creepy line to have in the show, and worked very effectively, especially the delivery of this line from both of the characters, with just how calmly and nonchalantly they say it, and the fact that they have to repeat it multiple times before our characters even click what is going on. And the concept of these creatures is a really great idea, very reminiscent of The Thing, and also quite reminiscent of that story Midnight, which I was talking about earlier on, which is what I wanted this episode to be like. And this concept also allows for some great character work and acting from Tennant and Tate in this episode. So I think the practical effects of the Not Things, such as the big long arms and the double knee and stuff like that, I think looks great. And the CGI in some points actually looks really good as well, but there were a few points with the CGI, such as the Snapchat filter or Miss Evangelista type face effects, as well as the Not Thing Doctor sticking his head out from underneath his legs, that I personally thought didn't look the best. And like I said earlier as well, some of the moments where they're running down the corridor, the CGI looks pretty bad as well, or is at least a bit noticeable where it shouldn't be. There's a few moments in here as well where the Doctor and Donna obviously inevitably get separated and don't know whether they're talking to their Not Thing self or the real self. And one of these situations we get a little reference to the Timeless Children and the Flux. We finally have acknowledgement that the Flux has destroyed half the universe and that it hasn't been fixed or reset, which is something that Chibnall didn't even bother to do in his own era, which was something that really annoyed me about the Flux. And we also get to see more emotion from the Doctor and more of a reaction from the Doctor about the Timeless Children stuff than we also got in Chibnall's era, which isn't like Jodie's fault or anything. It's more Chibnall not writing a scene like this for Jodie in that era, which I think was a really missed opportunity, so I'm glad that we got that in this. So then we find out that the Not Things basically learn things from the characters the faster they do stuff, and that's the reason they're trying to scare them, to get their adrenaline pumping and to get them thinking so that they can copy them even faster and even better, which leads to this great moment where the Doctor, wanting to solve all these mysteries, is told that he needs to stop thinking so that the Not Things can't evolve and become more like them. But obviously he just really wants to think and try and solve all these mysteries that have been set up earlier on in the episode, which he eventually ends up doing. And so that reveals these few mysteries that we had at the start of the episode, with the clanging being the captain floating in space,
Rehab was supposed to be a fresh start,
which also explains the airlock being opened and closed 3 years ago. We find out the words are actually a countdown, they're actually the numbers of the language that these aliens spoke, which I think was really well done because the Doctor initially shrugs off the possibility of a countdown early on. And we also find out the reason that Jimbo, the robot, was walking so slowly was because it was slowly walking towards this self-destruct button that the captain had set up and made to go slowly so that the Not Things couldn't figure out what was going on. And the conclusion to this story, initially I was a little bit confused, and it did feel a little bit like a Deus Ex Machina of sorts, but it does actually kind of make sense when you think about it and kind of realize what it means and what's actually going on, because the TARDIS would obviously know if the Not Things aren't going to be able to reach Jimbo in time to stop the countdown, which is what is about to happen. The TARDIS would obviously realize that and be able to show up early enough to pick up the Doctor and Donna. But obviously then the Doctor picks up the wrong Donna in a great moment where he asks them the question that was set up earlier on about Mrs. Bean, asking them the question why that name is funny, and he ends up taking the Donna that says because it just is, because he obviously thinks that's more like what Donna would say, but this ends up actually being the wrong Donna, which I think is great because it kind of shows that although that would make sense and that is what I was thinking in my head, I was like, yeah, that would be the right Donna. It shows that maybe that would have been initially what the real Donna was thinking, but she probably thought that wasn't a good enough answer for the Doctor and probably overthought the question a little bit, which ultimately led to her not being taken by the Doctor and the Doctor not believing that she was the real one, which led to a great showcase of Catherine Tate's acting ability in this episode when she's shouting for the Doctor to come back because he's taken the wrong one. And then we get another fake out death with Catherine Tate, although this one works significantly better than the fake out death in the Star Beast, because they almost didn't play that one in the Star Beast seriously and give it enough weight to make it feel real, maybe because they knew that we knew she was going to be in future episodes. But in here they really play it as if it is actually about to happen, and even though we know she's going to be in the Giggle, for a second I still genuinely thought she might die here and maybe be replaced by her Not Thing counterpart or something like that, and I was genuinely on the edge of my seat from what I remember, like I was literally on the edge of my seat. But obviously the Doctor then realizes in the TARDIS, I think by scanning the Not Thing Donna, that she is in fact the Not Thing Donna, not the real Donna, which I do feel like was a little bit unsatisfying, a way of him realizing that that wasn't the real Donna, because it isn't actually about him kind of figuring it out himself. He just kind of scans her on the TARDIS and realizes that one of her arms is too long or something like that. So I think that could have been done slightly better. But obviously after doing this, the real Donna is then reunited with the Doctor in the TARDIS and they go back home, but they're maybe a day or two late according to the Doctor, which leads them to arriving exactly where they just left, but this time Wilfred Mott is there to greet them. And for those who don't know, Wilf is probably my favourite character in all of Doctor Who, and so I was so happy to see him. I knew he was going to be in this, I just didn't know exactly when we were going to see him, but I'm so glad we finally did, even if this is going to be his only appearance in the specials, which has been alluded to. The fact that this is the scene that they managed to film with him is just so great, because it was such a great scene and such a great moment between him and the Doctor and Donna, and the perfect scene for his reappearance in the show, because now we finally at least know that he knows Donna remembers these things now, he can talk to Donna about it, and he finally gets to see the Doctor in the same face that he remembers once again. Like I said, I think it was the perfect scene to have of him in this special, and I'm just so grateful that we actually got to have this scene and this moment in these specials. And it's just great to see Wilf and Bernard Cribbins again, obviously. And then this leads to a great cliffhanger to the next episode, the Giggle, where we just kind of see everyone going crazy, which, you know, doesn't give too much away and just perfectly sets everything up. Really feels like there's high stakes going into this next episode straight from the get-go, and I just can't wait to see where this leads us to. So, like I said at the start of this video, although we were expecting a little bit more from this episode, or at least some people were, all I personally wanted from this was something weird and mind-bending and scary, with some good character work and emotion, and like I said, something a little bit like Midnight from Series 4. And obviously, like I said, that's exactly what we got, and I loved it. The character work in this was great, whether that be between the Doctor and Donna, or them and their Not Thing counterparts. I do think this episode works a lot better on the the page, it's perfect on the page, and it works almost perfectly in the execution because, like I said, the practical effects look great, but obviously some of the CGI was a little bit ropey in there, but for me it still kind of works just because of how weird it was. So obviously, like I said, next we've got the Giggle, which I will be reviewing when that comes out, obviously, so subscribe if you don't want to miss that, and if you haven't already seen my review for the Star Beast, I'll have that on screen now.